So for the last talk for this morning's session, we've got Sarah Gibson, who's going to be talking about some recent experiences around Outreachy internships with the JupyterHub team. So thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, apologies, there's like a much longer title in the schedule, but this is like the gist of what I'm going to talk about. So yeah, hi everybody, I'm Sarah Gibson. For this talk, I am wearing my hat as the JupyterHub Community Strategic Lead, and I'll talk a little bit about like what that means as well. And yeah, JupyterHub recently took on some Outreachy interns, and this talk is a little bit to reflect on how that process went and what ways JupyterHub need to improve its processes to continue that. So first of all, we were given we wrote a grant that was funded by the CZI Chan Zuckerberg Institute, their Essential Open Source Science program. They run this program quite regularly. Different projects in Jupyter have received these kind of grants previously, and this time around, JupyterHub specifically received a grant, one of these grants. And the grant vision was to provide community strategic support for the project JupyterHub. It put me in the role of community strategic lead to kind of think about these processes and such. And one of the many grant goals we had was we wanted to create some effort to provide inclusive and effective pathways into and throughout the JupyterHub community. So not just like bringing on new people, but how they can progress through the JupyterHub project as they wish, up to leadership, something else to be decided. So how we decided to build these inclusive pathways was to work with a specific organization called Outreachy. If you don't know anything about Outreachy, they are a nonprofit organization, and their job is to provide internships in open science and open source projects. And they provide these internships to people who are subject to systemic bias and impacted by underrepresentation in the technical industry where they are living. So this really feeds into our diversity, equity, and inclusion theme that this grant is trying to address, in that many people who come to Jupyter or JupyterHub or any of the sub-projects, there is a common story of exhausted, frustrated PhDs who want to try and make the world a better place, which is great, and we thank you all. But those are not the only voices that can help improve Jupyter, and especially in places where tech is not as advanced, it's not as moving as quickly as it is in the global north. It's really important that we provide ways for those voices to engage and be brought into the community. So these very important points about these internships is that they are paid, which is really important if you're working with underrepresented groups. They are remote. Again, I mean, we're all working remote pretty much, especially in open source. But that also helps people from other areas of the world collaborate with us as well. And there are a 3-month-long internship as well that run twice a year. So in December 2022 was our most recent cohort. It's not the first cohort of Outreachy we've ever run. Project Jupyter at JupyterHub has ever run, but it was the first one that was under this kind of community strategic vision and done, I want to say done with intention, but that implies that the folk who ran it last time weren't doing it intentionally. They actually were, but we had some structure and some definitive funding to support this. So we got 3 awesome people, Olga Blessing, who worked with Minrag and Kelly on improving the accessibility of the JupyterHub pages, Alan Wasega, who worked with me to improve and restructure the JupyterHub documentation and applying the diet access framework, and Sheila Kawai, who worked on with Georgiana Dolican on creating a reusable JupyterHub PyTest plugin as well. One awesome thing that has come out of this is that both Blessing and Sheila are at JupyterCon. And a big thanks to the JupyterCon organizing committee that provided the scholarships so that they were able to travel here and helped with visa issues as well. Sheila is giving a talk on Friday about her experiences. Please look her up in the schedule and go ahead and support her. Alan, unfortunately, did not get a visa decision in time, so I will be presenting a recording of his experiences on Friday as well. So I want to talk about things that went well and things to celebrate during this process. We got 3 brand new people contributing to JupyterHub, which, as an open source maintainer, whenever a new person comes along, is like, you bring out the ticker tape, you put on a parade, because there's just so much opportunity to breathe new life into a project as well. And we got 3 new people in one go, and it was fantastic. Even beyond the 3 interns we brought on board, we had lots of participation, and even those applicants that we did not select talked about how great of an experience they had during the contribution phase and applying to the JupyterHub projects, on how welcoming we were, on different aspects of like finding their way around the project. So I just want to extend my very sincere thanks to all the members of JupyterHub that stopped their busy days to help answer questions for all of these people. We reviewed over 40 applicants, and that was after we already trimmed down the applicant list. We actually only had funding for 2 interns, and we got extra funding from Outreachy for the 3rd, so we are an incredibly popular project to work with. We learned about our onboarding processes and documentations and improved them, because one way to stress test your onboarding is to have 60 people turn up and try and do stuff. So that was intense, but I feel like our onboarding documentation has like really improved because of it. And thank you to everybody who put in the work, making those changes and sort of extracting what needed to be changed to solve the problems someone was having. And this provided an opportunity for the JupyterHub team to tackle some topics that were really important to us that maybe we wouldn't have gotten around to if we didn't have this structure. So I mentioned before, we had 3 topics on accessibility, documentation, and testing. I'm sure we all know, working in open source projects, there's always that issue that you're like, when I have a minute, and that minute never comes. But this gave us an opportunity to really structure ourselves into trying to make some progress towards that. I mean, asking the intern to do 100% a perfect job isn't fair, but like, we made inroads towards things that we care about. Georgiana as well, I mentioned earlier on in the talk that this round wasn't the first time we ran Outreachy as JupyterHub. First time was a few years ago, and Georgiana Dolican was one of those interns. She has had an amazing sort of career path into becoming a fully fledged JupyterHub member. And now we have this really amazing circular story that we can tell about her journey from being an Outreachy intern into becoming an Outreachy mentor. So thank you, Georgiana. And we developed processes and guidelines for future participation. As we were going through this process, I spent a lot of time writing down decisions we'd made and hosting retrospectives and how would we do things differently. And we now have a website that members of JupyterHub can visit and see the processes of how we want to participate in Outreachy regularly, so we're not doing all of these things from scratch every time. This is still WIP, so I do invite work in progress, so I do invite you to check it out and let me know if there's anything that could be improved. There's definitely still a lot of open issues of bits and pieces I'd like to fit into there. And if we can, as we continue running Outreachy rounds, I'm sure it will sharpen and improve over time as well. Some things that didn't go so well, the amount of invisible labor that goes into running an Outreachy round in your project is large, and we did not correctly resource for this. Specifically, the interns are paid. Outreachy handles payment to the interns, but we didn't have any recompensation mechanisms for mentors. And when you consider the amount of time mentors have to put in scoping a project that applicants can apply to, scoping good first issues for the applicants during the contribution phase to work on, that many people can work on at the same time without getting in each other's way, and provide a learning path to onboard a completely new person, not just to Jupyter, but to open source, onto what is an actually very technical package. It requires so much thinking time that it needs to be recompensed. And actually, monetary recompensation is like the minimum that you can do, but it's also a really hard thing to do. A lot of us in open source are volunteers, and we have different shapes of our lives. I, for example, am self-employed, so to be recompensed as a mentor is just as simple as another invoice that I write. But there were other mentors who work for companies, and if we wanted to recompense them financially, that would involve either negotiating with their current employers, or we would have to give money, and they would probably have to, declare that on their tax, and that's just asking for more invisible labor. But this is also across open source. This is not a JupyterHub problem. This is not a Jupyter problem. This is across open source, and it's a how do we fund open source, open science problem as well. Another problem is, how do you support volunteers in carving out and protecting their time? I don't have any control over what someone's employer is asking them to do during the period of time that overlaps with running the Outreachy interns, and it's already a lot of invisible labor. And I don't know what the answer to this is, unfortunately. Other than that, I see the projects that do well in these kind of initiatives are those that are housed in institutions where workload can be managed to make space for mentorship. So I think we need to reflect on that and think about either how do we work with values-aligned organizations, or is there something else we can do in a volunteer basis as well? Another challenge was the contribution period itself. And I want to caveat this slide with the fact that the round of Outreachy that we went was a bumper round. The previous round, Outreachy had their first Chinese intern take place, and they wrote a blog. And that promoted Outreachy to the Chinese student population, both in that area of Asia and in Australia as well. So there was a huge influx of students from that demographic. There were also strikes happening in Nigeria and other African-based universities that Outreachy said, if you're affected by those strikes and you are not getting paid your studentships, you qualify for Outreachy and you have an opportunity to get paid through us, which was absolutely the right thing to do. But it did mean we got a lot of people. As I mentioned, we had over 40 applications to go through, and that was after we'd narrowed that down. So this is all of the invisible labor we had to do. It was overwhelming for 3 mentors and some members of the community as well to keep up with the requests for help, for what do I do, for emails coming into your personal inbox saying, here's my CV, and you're like, thank you, that's not a requirement for you to give to me, bless them. I already mentioned it's writing the contribution issues, writing a good first issue is like really, really hard when you only have one issue you need to write and you're not under the time constraint of a month-long intake period. It's a really difficult skill, and there's a very fine line between getting it right and making it too easy that everybody piles onto it and does the same issue. So things we need to improve. Communication channels, we need to be very strict about which communication channels applicants get in contact with us so that people aren't managing overflowing personal inboxes. We need a many-to-many communication channel where many applicants can get in contact with many mentors, and any mentor can answer that question. We need to build clearer pathways for the applicants as they're working through contribution issues and phases, such that the question, what do I do now, doesn't come up as much. And the management of contribution issues as well, of who's assigned to what issue, how many people are working on this issue at the same time, how many pull requests related to this issue are open, and are they going to conflict with one another when they're merged. We tried a system using spreadsheets and this idea of someone has claimed something to work on, and they moved their name to a column when their PR was merged, and this didn't work as well as we'd like to. We need to make that a more robust locking mechanism so that we don't get as many pull requests that cause merge conflicts, because these are new people to the idea of a pull request, and they've got no idea how to resolve a merge conflict. So that's more invisible labor by the mentors and the community members going around and fixing all of these merge requests. So we reflected on all of these, and we have begun building some of the we should have done these things instead of what we did into our documentation already. So I said a lot of negative things just there. So I'm going to bring it back to the positive and just remind everybody that these initiatives are life-changing for the interns, even if they don't stick around with your project afterwards. They get so much value in seeing how open collaboration happens, how open source software is built, all of the skills that go around that, asynchronous communication, being very clear in your communication so that you can be understood via text by someone 12 hours out of your time zone. And that will enrich not just the broader open source, open science community, but also the tech industry as well, that we are feeding in those skills to these people and giving them the perspectives of the power of open source and open science. So even though there is a lot of invisible labor, and we still don't have this perfect yet, I still think we need to continue on and try. So what do we need to work on to make these things, to make sure that JupyterHub can continue to participate? One thing, we need to figure out how to lessen the burden, accurately, appropriately recompense mentors for the amount of work it takes for them to participate, given that they probably have full-time jobs, and this is probably not the only open source project they're contributing to either. I don't know the answer to that right now, and I would love to have a conversation around how we could start supporting people in that way. The other way is we need to improve our process of managing contributions, and my engineering brain clicked on this, and I do have one idea of how we could possibly automate task assignment and pull request opening, such that, again, the mentors don't have to get involved with assigning issues manually to people, because you can't assign an issue to yourself unless you have right permissions on the repository. But there are tools out in the ecosystem that I know do similar things. So if you're an engineer who wants to automate and hack on a bot that does some task management, come and talk to me. and because anybody who knows me will tell you that I love a bot. But yeah, I think these are two things that we can work to make this process easier for our community members to participate in this very values-aligned, very impactful mission. So thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to talk to me in depth on this topic, or my love of bots, or just be like, hi, you're a human being that I think I need to have a conversation with, I've put a Calendly link up here, so you can book a 30-minute slot with me during the conference, and we'll go out front and grab a coffee and have a sit down, so please feel free to take that. And I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you very much.